acolyte, my chosen, hear me. Once you were a whisper in the monastery, a fleeting thought of a light. But the light has no power in the depths, and you hungered. You thrust the touch of chaos upon the king of the mists, committing the regicide no mortal dared. His crown of fog now feeds your chaos. You tore Zesht, that pitiful breachworm, from his realm, banishing him back into the abyss. His shrieks still echo, nourishing your strength. You ascended the pinnacle of flame, where others were reduced to ash. You walked through fire, untouched, fueled by my gift. You have captured the corruption of Rayclast itself, twisted its foul essence into armor, into power, into you. You do not merely slay my acolyte. You take. You drink the energy from their dying breath, siphon their force into your veins, weave their stolen life into shields of unbreakable chaos. You are no longer bound by flesh, nor by mercy. You are my vessel, my weapon, my shadow. Through you, they will all fall. Rise, acolyte of Chayula. Fulfill your destiny. Become my demigod, hand of the king of chaos. Together, we will ensure chaos reigns. Hello and welcome back to another build guide. Hopefully you enjoyed the introduction to Chayula's hand, Demigod, is what I have decided to call this build. And in this final update to this build, I'll still be doing some updates to it through the stream. So if you want to keep following the character, you can do so through the stream. But most of the content for the rest of the season will either be on a new character, currency farming, maybe some other project stuff that I want to test with Falling Thunder. But for this video, we're going to be going over the skills first, then the gear, then we'll be doing passive tree, so that you have a full understanding of how Acolyte of Chayula works, and why I think it's the best character and ascendancy for FlickerStrike in Dawn of the Hunt. Without further ado, the first thing that we're going to get into is the skills and how we're solving elemental resistances. Quarterstaff Strike, it doesn't matter what you have in it. This is just kind of storage for gems, skill gems that can be useful inside of FlickerStrike. But our bossing setup most of the time is pinpoint critical, hit and run, momentum, embitter, and concentrated effect. Hey Korihor, why are we going embitter instead of just another pure damage support like overextend or ambrosia? Well, I have a good answer for you. It's because Conk Effect is better than ambrosia. And two, we want to convert everything to cold damage because of some things that we have in the passive tree that I will go over later that essentially enable us to take the damage from Infernal Cry and any other kind of extra damage that we have, convert it to cold, and then we have our curse, Hypothermia, and cold exposure, which I'll go through later on in the skills, that get us to negative 87% resistance on the boss. So we're getting a 12% more damage boost from our cold damage, and that's enabling us to obviously cut through all resistances and to do some extra damage on top of that. Right now I'm using Falling Thunder as my filler. You can use Stormwave here, you can use Ice Strike. It doesn't really matter what you use here, but the three main skill gems that you're putting in this filler slot is Ambush, Unbreakable, and Martial Tempo. A lot of times I also put Martial Tempo in FlickerStrike, and then I'll just put like Close Combat or Ambrosia in Falling Thunder as my filler spell. Important note on FlickerStrike is more melee levels is king on FlickerStrike, so you want +1 level from Corruption on this, so make sure that you're getting your level 21 FlickerStrike. Charge Staff is another one that we love to have as a +1 level Corruption because it does give us more flat added lightning attack damage, and flat damage is king with a lot of your melee based builds. So Charge Staff and FlickerStrike are our main level 21 skills. Charge Staff is supported with Persistence, Cold Exposure, Lightning Exposure, Fire Exposure, and Strip Away. Fire Exposure is pretty impossible because that means Charge Staff has to be the thing that's igniting, and it almost never does, which that's why Cold Exposure became very important. And the reason why we chose Hypothermia and Embitter is because Cold Exposure is very consistent. All we have to do is have Charge Staff do a critical hit, and within 2 hits, it's pretty much guaranteed because our critical hit chance on the Shockwave is 62.5%. So we have 2 hits, it's applied, and you're good to go. Our cold exposure is at 30%, and I'll show you how we get there, and you saw it in the gameplay videos as well. Infernal Cry is important for single target. I corrupt this to 23% so that we can get 36% of damage as fire per 5 power instead of 35. So this gives us 144% instead of 140% extra fire damage. That extra fire damage, again, is converted back to extra cold damage. Premeditation for 15% more damage. Raging Cry to get rage on each time we scream. Enraged Warcry to consume the rage to deal 30% more damage. And when we yell twice, we end up having 21 rage left over after consuming it with Enraged Warcry. So 21% more damage from rage, 30% from Enraged Warcry, and 15% from Premeditation with it socketed into Second Wind. You can Perfect Jewelers this and put an Ingenuity in here if you want, but you shouldn't need it. Profane Ritual, Arcane Tempo, Unleash, Fast Forward, just for our standard manual cast Profane Ritual here. Herald of Thunder, Glaciation, Cold Infusion, Lightning Mastery, Ice Bite, and Primal Armament. You just want to juice this up as much as possible. This is also a great candidate for Corruption, 21, Herald of Thunder. Cast on Freeze. This is a huge part of the build, and why you saw so many big explosions, and why it's so great on Acolyte of Chayula is because we don't have to really solve mana. All we have to do is get Mana Leech on a ring, and we're good to go on mana for the rest of the game. Voltaic Mark, another good slot for Corruption, because obviously the higher level it is, the more that the mark is doing, because it does its own damage. It doesn't scale with your weapon. It just does its own base damage, so the higher level, the higher damage it's going to do. Reach, Innervate, Magnified Effect, Impetus. So more energy, extra damage is lightning when it kills, reach and magnified effect just to make it as big as possible. Cast on critical, we have Profane Ritual, Freezing Mark for bossing, and the only reason that we swapped to cast on critical is for bossing, so that we can apply Freezing Mark, so that we can freeze, and I'll explain in the passives why this is important. Energy Retention, Profusion for the Profane Ritual, and that should keep our charges healthy. Overabundance for less skill effect duration, so that the charges come back to us faster with Profane Ritual, and so that we can apply Voltaic Mark when we freeze and Freezing Mark when we crit with Overabundance, because it enables 2 marks to be on the target. Sacrifice for pre-boss and pre-map, sacrificing of your minions so that you can get power charges. Minion Mastery just makes the cooldown a little bit lower. And then lastly is Hypothermia, corrupted with quality, so it has higher magnitude. We have Cursed Ground and Heightened Curse, so the magnitudes go higher. The other thing is that we're converting our Flames of Chayula to cold damage as well, which ends up being around a 25% overall damage increase when we have 5, and it's very easy to get 5 stacks rolling on bosses, which then also gets boosted by the 12% negative that we go into with cold damage. So going to go a little bit out of order. So before we go into gear, we're actually going to go in the passive tree because there's some things with the skills that are important to call out. First off is the Ascendancy. Ravenous Doubts, Consuming Questions. You want your Mana Leech to give you Energy Shield, and you want Mana Leech to recover based on all elemental damage types and Chaos and Physical. Which means, because Volt Mark is an attack, this leeches too. So anytime you're mapping, you're going to have tons of instant leech going, and it's just incredible. We do Lucid Dreaming for double effect of Flames of Chayula, because 5 stacks with what we have supported in Into the Breach. Magnetism, Strong-Hearted, Herbalism, Warm-Blooded, and Interlude. Interlude gives us 25% increased effect of these flames. So that's 14%, because Into the Breach gives us 7% on purple flames. Gets doubled by this to 14%. Gets increased by 25% here for 17.5% on every single stack of Flame of Chayula. So we want to pick as many of those up as possible before we boss, and because we're always killing bosses within 10 seconds of picking those up, we're benefiting from all the damage. And Magnetism enables us to be picking these up as we're mapping and flying through the map on FlickerStrike all the time. So why is Embitter important? Well, Embitter is important, one, because our second weapon set, we've swapped it out of Minion Revive Time into Curse Magnitudes. So we've got 8% Curse Magnitude here, 36% here for 44% Magnitude, another 10% Magnitude here for 54%. We get 11%, so 65% Curse Magnitude from the Curse thing here, and another 25% Magnitude here, for a grand total of 90% Magnitude on top of 29%, which is giving us 29 times 1.9, 55, and for whatever reason it shows 57 on the boss, so I think there's some other calculation that I'm not seeing here. And then our cold exposure with Exposed to the Cosmos. Cold exposure you inflict lowers total cold resistance by an extra 5%, plus Strip Away on Charge Staff gives us negative 30% cold exposure. So adding those two together, 57 plus 30 gives us negative 87, which all bosses have no more than 75% max cold resistance. The rest of the tree is staying pretty similar, with the exception of we're moving out of Subterfuge Mask, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points, and we're essentially moving those 6 points to this side of the tree for stats and energy shield and ailment and stun threshold. So those 6 points essentially go right here instead of right here, which also is giving us an additional 58% maximum energy shield. So that means that we are not evasion based at all whatsoever. We are purely energy shield based. And the reason we can pull this off is because of the ailment threshold and stun threshold that we get based on our energy shield. And we just go all in on energy shield, and then we're always constantly at cap energy shield because of a piece of gear that I will show in just a second, as well as the Ascendancy, right? The Ascendancy is really what enables us to be capped energy shield at all times. So now to just go through some of the basics of the tree. I'm sure there's some points that I can move around, but this is a pretty final and great version of the tree. Starting at skill speed, getting critical damage bonus, flow like water, come around the horn to get step like mist. These stats are great for us because it allows us to get to how stat hungry we are. At the end game of this build, you want 205 dex, 55 strength, and 191 intellect, so that you can run the highest levels of things as possible to make this run as great as we can. This also gives 4% movement speed, which is great. Then we're pathing through critical hit chance here. Then we're pathing through here, getting Essence of the Mountain for some extra cold and more freeze buildup. Power charges, critical hit chance, and some critical damage bonus. Energy shield and ailment, energy shield and stats. Here for 50% total increased attack damage because we're always full life. +3 level of FlickerStrike skills. This can be replaced with Voltaic Mark skills, and it will help your map clear be better, but obviously that won't help your bossing, because I understand that FlickerStrike skills is like 60 divine right now. Then we're just getting the True Strike for the Jugular and Deadly Force, as much crit as we can grab right here so that we remain crit capped. Eternal Youth, so our flask is going to be filling up our energy shield as an oh shit button. Power charges, exposed to the cosmos for single target. Thin Ice for increased damage with hits against frozen enemies. I'm also going to take Heavy Frost once I hit 97, and I'm not sure which one's better, Heavy Frost or Thin Ice. Careful Assassin for a bunch of extra crit. Shimmering Mirage Abasement for stun recovery, stun threshold, and ailment threshold. I don't remember the last time I got frozen other than clicking a strongbox. Chaos Inoculation. From Nothing Diamond with Zealot's Oath. So that is giving us 75% increased attack damage. So 3 points are going here that you have to allocate. Stats. Patient Barrier for energy shield. Forthcoming for skill effect duration. Reduced, which just means that the power charges are coming back to us faster. And then I already talked about the curse magnitude nodes here. Then we're coming down this way for +2 maximum power charges. Tons of critical damage bonus with Throat Seeker. Freeze buildup and defenses with Quarterstaffs. So we're going all the way to 1 with the River. We go to 1 with the Storm so that we get an extra 2 strikes out of FlickerStrike with this. Our Against the Darkness is crazy. Double 4% extra. Extra cold damage is important to make sure that the freezes are popping on this build. Heart Stopping. Struck Through, Heartbreaking, and critical damage bonus and critical hit chance. And that is the tree with the 3 gems. Originally, I was taking the points out of Exposed to the Cosmos as well as Thin Ice to go up and get this jewel socket, but I can't afford any megalomaniacs that would make this jewel socket worth it. But that is another optimization that we could make. But even still, I don't know if it's worth taking it out of extra 5% cold res and extra damage when frozen. If this was a 2-point jewel, it'd be a no-brainer, but because it's a 4-point jewel, it's a lot more difficult. So that is the passive tree. Lastly, we have our items. Aziri's Acuity is really what keeps us super healthy, and to min-max here, we want melee skills because melee skills is king. And then we have, great stats, great critical hit chance. It's really crazy to have 50% critical hit chance on your gloves because it's not a piece that normally carries gloves. Is carried on gloves. Heavy belt is extremely important for stun threshold, so we want to make sure that we're always running a heavy belt with this build. This is just resistances, some mana, and a heavy belt. Sandsword Sandals. I picked these up 2 nights ago for 20 div. Really great because it's essentially a heavy belt in my boots, and it's also giving me rarity, resistances, and a metric shit ton of energy shield. So these are great. Amulet is where I'm storing my spirit. I also get spirit on my chest. So increase maximum energy shield. This is where I'm getting a bunch of attributes. This is where I'm getting melee skills. This is where I'm getting some crit. So all great stuff. We're anointing Crushing Verdict, which is just 50% extra damage. Not extra damage, 50% increased attack damage. And we're not doing Voracious anymore because we have Aziri's Acuity. And 50% attack damage is super great. Because we're constantly running Pinpoint Critical, we won't go for the critical damage bonus nodes just because there's such a penalty to critical damage bonus with Pinpoint Critical. Not that you should unspec from it entirely, but 50% flat attack damage with Crushing Verdict just ends up being better. Helmet has our +1 maximum power charges, a ton of energy shield, rarity, and crit. Vest has some intelligence, some resistances, as big of energy shield as I could get, and 30 spirit to get us to the new required spirit for this build at 180 spirit. You can still absolutely run 2 cast on freezes, but if you want to automate bossing and not have to swap anything out, and you just leave all your skill gems the same with the exception of maybe swapping in some different gems that maybe you're using something for bossing, but or something for mapping, and you want to swap in something for bossing, then you can do that. And so with all that, we do need 1 unset ring so that we can run hypothermia without switching any gear. That's, again, the main goal of optimizing this is, you saw we one-shot all content. We're extremely healthy in maps. We clear maps like a MFer, and we need the unset so that we don't need to swap anything out. So this just has some damage to attacks, rarity, some attributes, and res. This ring I just picked up as well. Huge damage to attacks, big increased cold damage, and which is huge because we're converting so much of our extra damage to cold damage. This is getting increased after the fact. And then resistances. Our staff is almost mirror tier, and we got very lucky crafting this earlier on in the league about 2 weeks ago. But again, it's melee skills. You want at least 14% critical hit chance. The leech to physical damage as mana is not crazy important. You can pick this up on a ring instead. The dream would be having critical damage bonus on this instead. But the other prefixes are pretty non-negotiable. Well, the main non-negotiable prefix is elemental damage with attacks. And then, generally speaking, you do want the critical damage bonus cores in here as well. But the elemental damage to attacks is huge because it's buffing all of that extra damage that we get from Infernal Cry and the elemental damage we're getting on our rings and all of that great goodness. So that's another A to Z on all of the gear. As a final note, we have the Ultimate Life Flask here that is instant recovery. So if I take my amulet off, you'll see I'm at 0 energy shield. The reason we have instant is when we do get light stunned eventually, it happens rarely, we have an oh shit button to get us back to full super quickly rather than waiting for it to tick up. And that gives us a chance to throw out an ability so that Adziri's Acuity can get us back to full energy shield instantly. The reason why I am using Falling Thunder as my filler instead of Stormwave is because we're so invested into power charges. Maze will use Falling Thunder on small packs instead of FlickerStrike because why not? I hope you've realized and had a lot of fun with this build throughout this. I am still going to try to commit to doing as much FlickerStrike content through this league as well as at the start of next league. But if Flicker does get nerfed into the dirt, as a lot of people are expecting, I think next league will be a Falling Thunder build, so it'll still be power charge based. But if I can make Flicker work next league, I will be making Flicker work next league. I hope you all are enjoying Chayula's Hand, Demigod, and I will see you on the stream almost every day. Thanks, everyone. Please remember to like and subscribe. We're almost to my goal of 1,000 subscribers, and it would mean the world to me. And I've really appreciated all the support so far, everyone joining the Discord, and really can't say enough that you guys are making this hobby and this like choice of spending as much time as I am doing this just super incredible. So I just want to say thank you all from the bottom of my heart. See you in the next one.